don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so that anytime we upload a new video, you'll be notified. Thank you.
Hallelujah. Hallelujah. Giving praise and honor to Yehovah, our God, who's the King of the universe, and thanking him for all of our lives. Thanking him for strength and good health, and blessing us with another opportunity to call upon his name, to be able to come before him and to worship him and to acknowledge that there is none beside him. For we acknowledge that Yehovah is the one that in the beginning created the heavens and the earth, as we read in the book of Genesis, and that's the God that we worship, because that's the only God that actually exists. Right. That's the the book that we read, the Holy Scriptures, which they call the Old Testament, is the only book you'll find where the God that created the heavens and the earth speaks out of, where his name is mentioned and where his word is mentioned, and where we receive the commandments, statutes, and judgments that is given by him for mankind to live by. So we thank Yehovah God for the knowledge, the wisdom, and the understanding that he has given us. We know that we don't have it all. We know that in every place that people call upon the name of Yehovah God, we don't have it all. But collectively, we do have it all. That's right. So we thank the Most High God for even allowing us during this time to come together. And we're going to be reading about the coming together of the children of Yisrael as we are going into the book of Hosea at this time. But we're going to be reading about the things that we've done in the past that the Most High did not like. But as we progress in the book of Hosea, we're going to read that Yehovah God does love the children of Israel. So regardless of the things that we have done, we have to thank God for him being him, because he is a God that keeps his word. So everything that he spoke to Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, he continues to keep today. So even though we have the children of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, even though we have gone astray, even though we have sinned, even though we have committed abomination, Yehovah God is still continuing to keep that covenant that he made with our fathers. So we just hope that maybe it is this generation that will come out of these lands of captivity. As we are reading about, as we read early this morning, and we'll continue to read in the morning about the Exodus out of Egypt, we're just praying that Yehovah God would allow that great thing that we read about, or that great event that we read about, to happen in this generation. But we have to cry out to the Most High God in order for that to happen. That's one of the things that we have to do. Because crying out to the Most High God is what helped get us out of Egypt. Yehovah God was just fulfilling his word that he spoke to Abraham, but we have to cry out, because that's what caught the Most High's attention. That was read the weeks prior, that once we cried out, once the children of Israel cried out because of the harsh bondage, then he heard our cry. He saw our affliction. There are things that, today, we're distracted by a lot. So maybe we don't feel that affliction that we're supposed to feel. Maybe we don't have it within us to cry out like we're supposed to be crying out, because we're not seeing that, that harsh bond. We're distracted by a lot. Distracted by TV, distracted by radio, distracted by music, distracted by social media. We're distracted by a lot. But we have to realize that we are in a place that is afflicting us. We have to realize that we are in a place of oppression. We have to realize that we are in a place of slavery, and that we're not as free as we think we are. We try to claim some of the freedoms of the people of this country, but we don't get those same type of freedoms. As much as we may want those freedoms, as much as we may want to fight side by side for constitutional rights, those rights were not allotted unto us, especially at the time that the Constitution was written, where we were 3/5 of a human being. And it took amendments in order for us to get some of the rights that other people have. So we just have to realize where we are, and not just in America, but we're scattered all throughout the earth facing oppression. This is not just an oppression in one place, but Yehovah God said he would scatter the children of Israel to the four corners of the earth, or the four winds in the earth, as it's written in some places. So we have to make sure that we return to the Most High God. So when we're reading in the book of Hosea throughout these chapters, for the weeks to come, we're going to see how much love that Yehovah God has for the children of Israel, even though we have gone astray. And even though at this time that we're reading about, as we read about in the beginning, we'll be reading about from the beginning that Hosea is what we would say contemporary with Isaiah. So the messages that we will be reading in the book of Hosea are the same messages that Yehovah God was given to Isaiah. Just like when we read the books of Jeremiah and Ezekiel, that Jeremiah and Ezekiel were contemporary with one another, and we saw how consistent the word of Jehovah God was written in both books. We're going to see how consistent Jehovah God is as we read in the book of Hosea with the book of Isaiah. So we're going to begin reading in the book of Hosea, chapter 1.
Hallelujah.
Hallelujah.
The word of Yahweh that came unto Hosea, the son of Be'eri, in the days of Uzziah and Yotam and Achaz and Hezekiah, kings of Yehudah, in the days that Jeroboam, the son of Joash, king of Israel.
So once again, this is just telling us when or what time or which kings that Hosea was prophesying during. And just once again, just to show that he was contemporary with Isaiah, as it says in the book of Isaiah, chapter 1, the vision of Isaiah, the son of Amos, which he saw concerning Judah and Jerusalem in the days of Uzziah, Yotam, Achaz, and Hezekiah, kings of Judah. So we see here that these were the same kings that Hosea was prophesying, just to show the consistency that Jehovah God. But it also, as we read throughout the book of Hosea, we'll see that Hosea was actually living in, or the territory he was living in and prophesying to, was the northern kingdom of Yisrael. So, and the Jeroboam was talking about here is the second Jeroboam. There were two kings called Jeroboam of the northern kingdom. So this is not the Jeroboam that actually started the northern kingdom, but there was a Jeroboam that reigned over the northern kingdom down the line. So this is the Jeroboam that's talking about here, the son of Jehoash, the king of Israel. But Hosea was prophesying in the northern kingdom, because once again, the nation of Israel was split up into two kingdoms after King Solomon died. And there were kings reigning concurrently in the kingdom of Judah, which is the southern kingdom, and in the kingdom of Ephraim, which is the northern kingdom. And Ephraim being the head tribe of the northern kingdom. So when we get throughout the book of Hosea, and you'll see references to Ephraim, it's because that's another term that is also given to the northern kingdom of Israel. Continue.
Verse 2. When Yahweh spoke at first with Hosea, Yahweh said unto Hosea, Go take thee a wife of harlotry, and children of harlotry, for the land doth commit great harlotry, departing from Adonai. So he went and took Gomer, the daughter of Diblaim, and she conceived and bore him a son.
So the first thing that we see here that was told to Hosea, God told him to take a wife of harlotry, and God gave him the reason why, because the children of Israel were committing harlotry in his sight. So harlotry is not something that is considered good in the sight of Jehovah God.
Message.
So once again, even though there were harlots in the land, there were various people, there were homosexuals in the land, there were very people that were doing abominable things in the land. But just because they were in the land doesn't mean that they were supposed to be in the land.
Gotcha.
But Jehovah God told the prophet Hosea, the prophet that's going to speak to the children of Israel, he told him, get a wife of harlotry, because as we continue to read, it would also cause Hosea to speak with the same passion that Jehovah God is going to speak in the children of Israel. Because it's the problems that Hosea will face marrying a harlot are going to be the problems that Jehovah God is having with the children of Israel, who is committing harlotry by bowing down to false gods. So as Hosea is speaking to the children of Israel, and Jehovah God is speaking in reference to us committing harlotry, Hosea will be able to speak with that same passion, because he's also one that has a wife that is a harlot. The children of Israel are wife to Jehovah God. So when we go aside and we're bowing down to idols or worshiping false gods, we're considered harlotry in the sight of Jehovah God. Just like a woman that goes aside from her husband is committing harlotry in the presence of her husband. Continue.
And Yahweh said unto him, Call his name Yisrael, for yet a little while, and I will visit the blood of Jezreel upon the house of Jehu, and will cause to cease the kingdom of the house of Israel. And it shall come to pass at that day, I will break the bow of Israel in the valley of Jezreel. And
Jezreel is God will plant. God will plant. That's what Jezreel means. And reading this, along with the book of 2 Kings, you'll see a lot of the evils that were committed during the times of 2 Kings by the northern kingdom. So as God is speaking to Hosea at this time, read it once again in, alongside what was happening with 2 Kings and how the lineage of Jehu were evil in the sight of Jehovah God. And then eventually that's when the northern kingdom ended up going into captivity. Continue.
And she conceived again and bore a daughter. And he said unto him, Call her name Lo Ruchama, for I will no more have compassion upon the house of Israel, that I should be in any wise, or that I should in any wise pardon them.
So Lo Ruchama means no compassion, because Ruchama is compassion, also translated as mercy. Lo means no or not. So Lo Ruchama means no mercy. So this child that Hosea is having with the harlot, the name is representative of what Jehovah God is thinking about the children of Israel during this time. But as God is speaking about the children of Israel, once again, Hosea is prophesying to the northern kingdom, because he's going to say this. Continue.
But I will have compassion upon the house of Yehudah, and I will save them by Jehovah their God, and I will not save them by bow, nor by sword, nor by battle, nor by horses, nor by horsemen.
And we read that early this morning as well, that the children of Israel doesn't win battles through our own strength and our own might.
Right.
Because all the honor and the glory goes to God.
Amen.
So when we came out of Egypt, it wasn't because the children of Israel did anything. Those 10 plagues, those signs and those wonders that came upon Egypt came directly from God onto Egypt. And even throughout the latter plagues, that the children of Israel were separate from the Egyptians, because those latter plagues did not touch us as it was in the Egyptians. So it wasn't by any might of our own. And we read that numerous times in the Psalms, that it's not by might, not by strength, not by the horses, that a king does not reign by his own might.
Right.
But Jehovah God is the one that sets up kings and takes kings down. So when God is saving the kingdom of Judah, because he's talking about the southern kingdom, because he's having compassion upon the kingdom of Judah, because there were numerous good kings that were living in the southern kingdom. Uzziah that we read about was a good king. And also, you can skip over some of the next names. And Hezekiah was also a good king. So God is having compassion upon the southern kingdom. But when we read in the book of Jeremiah, then we see that there was a switch. Because Jeremiah is after the northern kingdom, or during and after the northern kingdom going into captivity. And then that's when we read about Judah following the sins of her sister, Samaria. Because when we see other people doing evil, we tend to think that it's all about us and we're all doing good. But when God took away that northern kingdom, now we have to start to see ourselves. Because there's nobody for us to compare ourselves to. We can't say because we're not as evil as them that we're good. Once the northern kingdom went into captivity, now God focuses his attention upon the southern kingdom and the evil that was being done there. Continue.
Now when she had weaned Lo Ruchama, she conceived and bore a son. And he said, Call his name Lo Ami, for ye are not my people, and I will not be yours.
And this is the mindset that Jehovah God is having concerning the northern kingdom, because he's saying that you will not be Lo Ami. Ami is my people. Am is people. Ami is my people. Lo Ami, not my people. So as Hosea is having these children, this is the names that are given unto them are representative of what Jehovah God is thinking about the northern kingdom of Israel. Continue.
Now the number of the children of Israel shall be as the sand of the sea, which cannot be measured nor numbered. And it shall come to pass that instead of which was said unto them, Ye are not my people, it shall be said unto them, Ye are the children of the living God.
And this is the time that we're looking forward to, where right after it says Lo Ami, God is saying that the children of Israel will still be numerous, because Jehovah God is still going to fulfill that promise that he spoke to Abraham, that his children would be as numerous as the stars in the heaven, as numerous as the sand on the seashore and the dust upon the earth. So regardless of the amount of sins, iniquities, and transgressions that we have committed, Jehovah God is still going to fulfill his word. But it's going to be within a generation that is going to do good, that Jehovah God could bless that generation and make that generation numerous, as he said in those verses that we just read. And we will no longer be, because right now, we're not looked at as the people of God. People don't look at us and say that we're God's children.
What?
The way that we act is not as though we are any type of spirit or have any type of spirituality within us or any type of goodness within us. But it will come a time when people would no longer look at us as not God's people, but they will call us the children of the living God. Continue.
And the children of Yehudah and the children of Israel shall be gathered together, and they shall appoint themselves one head, and shall go up out of the land, for great shall be the day of Yisrael.
So there will come a time that there will no longer be this division. The division that is spoken about here is because we were northern and southern kingdom. It was Ephraim versus Judah. But that's not going to happen. We have a lot of divisions today amongst the children of Israel as we're scattered throughout the earth. But Jehovah God is saying that no longer are we going to be a divided nation. We read about that also in the book of Ezekiel, that he's going to put the two sticks together. Because even though we're all one people, even during this time we separate as two kingdoms, we thought that we were two separate nations and not realizing that we're all the children of the living God. But Jehovah God said there would come a time when we all come together and we'll appoint one head, because we're all supposed to be one under one leader. Continue.
Say ye unto your brethren, Ami, and to your sister, Ruchama.
So that low is taken out. That low for low in front of low Ruchama of no compassion, and that low in front of low Ami as now my people is taken away. And now Jehovah God is saying he's going to have compassion upon us, and we're also going to be his people. Continue.
Plead with your mother, plead, for she is not my wife, neither am I her husband. Let her put away her harlotries from her face and her adulteries from between her breasts.
And Hosea is going to be able to speak these things with the compassion that Jehovah God is speaking it to him as, because also Hosea is going to also realize, because remember he married a harlot that also went astray from him. So he's able to speak to the children of Yisrael and let them know that it was their parents that were committed these abominations, but that they should take away. So it's metaphorically speaking or allegorically speaking, saying that the generations prior, those sins were to be taken away. But the current generation, everybody that's alive today, has to turn away from the sins of our forefathers. Continue.
Lest I strip her naked, as set her in the day as she was born, and make her as a wilderness, and set her like a dry land, and kill her with thirst. I will not have compassion upon her children. They are the children of harlotry. Their mother played the harlot. She that conceived them have done shamefully. For she said, I will go after my lovers that give me my bread and my water, my wool, my flax, my oil, and my drink. Therefore, behold, I will hedge up the way with thorns, and I will make a wall against her, that she shall not find her path.
And what happens with a woman of harlotry, because she gets money and items from so many various places, that she's not paying attention to the one that's actually taking care of her. And that's how the children of Israel, that's how we act. We go astray. We're going into various religions. We're bowing down to idols and false gods and doing all of these things, not realizing that Jehovah God is the one that's actually protecting us. Because we think that it's the Christian God that is protecting us and giving us, everything that we have. We think it is the Muslim God that is protecting us and thinking that we have everything that we have. Now realizing that once again it's Jehovah God that gives us everything. So once again we are being compared to the children of harlotry who don't pay attention to where our actual source of life and substance is from. Continue.
She ran after her lovers, but she could not overtake them. She shall seek them, but shall not find them. Then she'll say, I will go to return to my first husband, for it was better for me than it is now.
Because after realizing that going after the various lovers, there's no profit in that, a harlot would go back to her first husband, the one that was actually taking care of her. So that's the comparison of the children of Yisrael, that we go astray and that we're going into these various religions. But once we see that there's no profit in it after a while, then we're going to go back to Jehovah God and beg him, hopefully, that he would take us back. And that's the things that we have to do now. But those of us that have been enlightened, those of us that know that Jehovah God is God, we can't neglect those that are still in religion. Because once again, this is something that we're all in together. The children of Israel together will come out of captivity. Mm-hmm. So we can't think that we have it and other people don't. As long as there are people that don't have them, we don't have still.
Right.
So we have to look out for everybody else and continue to teach the word of God and let people know that idolatry is wrong, that religion is wrong, and that the source of life is Jehovah God. Continue.
She did not know that it was I that gave her the corn, the wine, and the oil, and multiplied unto her silver and gold which she used for Baal. Therefore I will take back my corn in the time thereof, and my wine in the season thereof, and I will snatch away my wool and my flax, giving to cover her nakedness. Because
once again, as the harlot here doesn't realize, or the children of Israel being compared to the harlot, doesn't realize that it was Jehovah God that was giving all of this corn, all of the flax, all of the wool, everything to cover ourselves. So even when we went astray, we thought it was the false gods that was the ones that were blessing us, when it was Jehovah God that was blessing us all along, only because of his word and his promise to Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. But at a time when we start to realize that we were doing wrong, Jehovah God, and that we decide to turn back to Jehovah God is saying here that he's going to take those things away, because we have to really feel it. In order to return to God, we have to really feel it. It can't be a thing that we feel that we're rich and we're prosperous and we're succeeding, bowing down to false gods, and then when we decide to get enlightened, that we decide to turn back to God and we're going to still continue to be prosperous and successful. It doesn't work like that. That's why there were various people that come into this way of life for 2 weeks and think that everything is supposed to be good because now that they found truth. You have to really strip yourself. And as Jehovah God is saying here, he's really stripping us so that we can realize where the source of our success and prosperity really comes from. So if we really want that prosperity and that success, we have to sincerely turn to God. It's not going to happen by just turning to God in 2 weeks, thinking that everything is going to be okay, or 2 months or 2 years, and think that we're going to just strike it rich. Because once again, also, God didn't promise us riches. He promised us life and good health.
That's right.
And those are the things that we should be satisfied with. Everything else is just extra. The clothes that we have, the multitude of food that we have is just extra. But God promised us good health and a good life. And that's what we should be seeking for. Continue.
Well, now I will uncover her shame in the sight of her lovers, and none shall deliver her out of my hand. I will also cause all her mirth to cease, her feast, her new moon, and her Shabtot, and all her appointed seasons.
So that's not a good thing. It's not a good thing to not keep the Shabbat. It's not a good thing to not keep the appointed seasons. Because Jehovah God said he took those things away from us in his anger. So when you listen to people that say we're not supposed to keep the Sabbath day and not keep the appointed season of captivity, those are the people that are just continuing on with the punishment that Jehovah God put upon us. It's a punishment not to keep the Sabbath day. It's a punishment not to keep the appointed seasons and the new moons, and not to observe but acknowledge the new moons. It's a punishment not to do those things. Because Jehovah God says here clearly that he took those things away from us because he was angry with us because of the things that we did by bowing down to false gods. Continue.
I will lay waste her vines and her fig trees, whereof she said, these are my hire, that my lovers have given me. I will make them a forest, and the beasts of the field shall eat them. I will visit upon her the days of her idols, wherein she offered to them, and decked herself with earrings and her jewels, and went after her lovers, and forgot me, saith Jehovah.
Because when we in religion, we put our all into it. Think about what you've seen last, the Xmas that just passed. That regardless of all of the pandemic and everything that's going on, people still put their all into that. Buying gifts for their children and struggling to buy gifts for their children. Putting up trees and decking it, and unfortunately every year there's always fires at people's houses and people are losing their lives with Christmas trees going up and catching on fire. People put their all. You go to certain neighborhoods and you see, all houses are lit up. Everybody trying to outdo each other in the service of their false god. So that's what Jehovah God is saying, that there was a time that in our idolatry and everything, we put our all into it. But when we come to serving Jehovah God, we don't put that same effort into serving Jehovah God. Passover is what it is. When it shows up, it shows up.
Right.
Most of us don't even know when it's going to occur. It shows up, it shows up. Right. When Sukkot comes, it'll come. When it gets here, we'll put up a booth and we'll do what we got to do for 7 days and we'll go back to being regular. But when it comes to New Year's celebrations and Xmas and Kwanzaa and everything, everybody puts their all into that. We have to show people that we are the children of the living God by putting more of an effort in our service of the living God, as opposed to those that serve a dead God. People put more life into a dead God than we put life into a living God.
Right.
And that's not how it's supposed to be. And that's what Jehovah God is saying here. That's why he's angry with us, because we're thinking that when we were in idolatry, we received all of these riches because of the idols. And we put our all into the serving of the idols who could not see or could not hear. But when it comes to the living God, we serve him with a dead spirit. Continue.
I will allure her. And I will bring her into the wilderness, and speak tenderly unto her. I will give her her vineyards from thence, and the valley of Achor for a door of hope. She shall respond there as in the days of her youth, as in the days when she came up out of the land of Egypt.
Which we're reading about during this time when we came out of the land of Egypt, when we were joyous that Jehovah God brought us out of that affliction and out of that oppression. That's how Jehovah God will speak to us again and bringing us out of the lands of our captivity today. And we will respond to him as in our youth, comparing our youth to when he brought us out of Egypt. Continue.
And it shall be at that day, saith Jehovah, that thou shalt call me Ishi, shall no more call me Baali.
And this is just reference because Baal is also a reference to various false gods, but in Hebrew, Baal also means husband. And being that the children of Yisrael are wife to Jehovah God, as he gets to the next verse, he's going to say that any type of reference to Baal, Jehovah is going to take out of our mouths. So we'll refer to him as Ishi, as that's another term for husband. Ish is man or husband, just like Baal is master or husband. But Jehovah God is going to say, we're going to refer to him strictly as Ishi, as my husband, using that Hebrew terminology as opposed to a terminology that could also be connected with false worship. So, Baal once again means husband in Hebrew, but Jehovah God, as he's saying here, is going to take any type of reference to false worship out of our mouths. So we'll refer to him strictly as Ishi, and not Ishi or using Baali. Continue.
For I will take the names of the Baalim out of their mouths, and they shall no more be mentioned by their names.
And this is something that we can start doing now.
That's
because
right.
we also commanded not to mention the names of false gods. So we're supposed to be, the things that we're supposed to be looking forward to, we can start doing those things now.
That's right.
Continue.
And in that day I will make a covenant for them with the beasts of the field, and with the fowl of the heaven, and with the creeping thing of the ground. And I will break the bow and the sword and the battle out of the land, and will make them to lie down safely. I will betroth thee unto me forever. Yea, I will betroth thee unto me in righteousness and in justice, and in loving kindness and in compassion.
So these are the things that Jehovah God likes or loves. He loves righteousness, justice, loving kindness, and compassion. So if these are the attributes that he's going to betroth us with, these are the attributes that we should start seeking now. We should start seeking to be righteous people and start seeking to be just people. Just meaning that you justify the righteous and condemn the wicked. So justice is not always about just putting people down for the evil that they do. That's just a part of it. That's supposed to be done. But you're also supposed to elevate those that are doing the right thing also. So we also, once again, we're supposed to be seeking righteousness as well as justice. Making sure that any matter that is open, any open cases that are out there in Israel, they're supposed to be judged.
Message.
These are the things that Jehovah God loves. Righteousness, justice, loving kindness. These are the things that we should have for one another as well. That we're supposed to be kind to one another. And compassion. Looking out for those that are in need. Seeing that there are people that are homeless, helping them to find a home. People that are naked, finding clothes for them. People that are hungry, finding food for them. We're supposed to have compassion for one another. And these are the things that we're supposed to exhibit as a people. So as we're the children of the living God, we're supposed to be the ones going out there feeding the hungry and making sure that people are taken care of, and not the people that are worshiping a dead God. Because once again, people that are worshiping a dead God are putting more life into their belief than the children of the living God. We're supposed to be bringing people into this way of life by helping people and showing that loving kindness and that compassion that they can see within the children of the living God. Continue.
And I will betroth thee unto me in faithfulness, and thou shalt know Jehovah. And it shall come to pass in that day that I will respond, saith Jehovah, I will respond to the heavens, and they shall respond to the earth, and the earth shall respond to the corn and the wine and the oil, and they shall respond to Yisrael. And I will sow her unto me in the land, and I will have compassion on her that had not obtained compassion. And I will say unto them that were not my people, thou art my people. And they shall say, thou art my God.
And we can start saying those things now, because once again, we're reading about things that are going to happen in the future, but we're supposed to be acting as the people of God now. So as Yisrael is just a term, once again, that means God will plant. God, as says, he said here that he's going to sow, and the heavens and the earth are going to respond to Jehovah God, once again, on behalf of the children of Yisrael. So we're no longer going to be hungry. We're no longer going to be naked. We're no longer going to be an oppressed people, because Jehovah God will plant us in that righteousness, in that justice, that loving kindness, and that compassion, and also in that faithfulness that he will have towards us. So these are the things that we're supposed to be looking forward to having. The third chapter is very short, so we're going to go into that. And it also is a connection, because we're seeing here that regardless of how Jehovah God is speaking towards Israel, that he still has a love for us. And that even though he considers at a period in time as not his people, the covenant that he made with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob causes us to always be his people. But we have to respond to him as the heavens and earth will respond to him. And as he says that, thou art my people, we have to say to Jehovah God, thou art our God. We have to respond to Jehovah God that way, by saying that you are our God. These are the things that we can start doing from now, and also helping other people to get out of the religions and the way of life of serving dead gods, and bringing them into this way of life so that they can also respond being the children of the living God. Continue.
And Yahuwah said unto me, Go yet love a woman beloved of her friend and an adulteress, even as Yahuwah loveth the children of Israel, though they turn unto their gods and love cakes of raisins.
So once again, the prophet Hosea is told to, first he was told to marry a woman of harlotry. Now he's told to marry an adulteress, someone whose history is adultery. Once again, harlotry and adultery are things that Yahuwah God does not like. That's why these comparisons to harlotry and adultery is always put a tag upon the children of Yisrael. He's not going to compare us to things that are okay in his sight. So comparing us to harlots and adulteresses is something that Yahuwah God does not like. Even though the harlotry that we display in his sight and the adultery we display in his sight is bound under false gods, but he's not going to, when we're doing bad things, he's not going to compare us to something that is actually good.
Right.
Continue.
So I bought her to me for 15 pieces of silver and an omer of barley and a half omer of barley.
So he married a wife who had a history of being an adulteress, but he still paid a dowry for her.
Message.
Something that could be taken, we can talk about that.
That's right.
But marriage is something that's supposed to be taken very serious. And when anybody gets married, usually what would happen in our history is that there is some sort of dowry that is paid. When people get into relationships easily, it's easy to also get out of it. When you get into a relationship seriously, it's going to be very difficult to get out of it. So when you realize the time and the money that you put into a relationship, that it's not going to be so easy to get out of it. That's why even amongst Europeans, they say it's cheaper to keep her.
Oh, yeah.
Because they realize how much they invested into a marriage and they want to stay in it. Amongst Israelites, the divorce rate shouldn't be higher than it is around the world by percentage. Because people should want to stay together. But the prophet Hosea paid the dowry for a woman that had a history of adultery. But dowry is just something that people paid to get married anyway.
Right.
Once again, marriages weren't just something that people just jumped into, because once again, you could just jump right out of it if you jumped into it so easy. Continue.
And I said unto her, Thou shalt sit solitary for me many days. Thou shalt not play the harlot, and thou shalt not be any man's wife, nor will I be thine.
And the prophet Hosea thought it would have been easy for him to say that. But when somebody has a certain history, a certain pattern of living, it's going to be hard for them to get out of it. Yehovah God spoke to us the same way. He brought us out of Egypt. The great signs and the wonders brought us to Mount Sinai, spoke to us. We heard his voice and we trembled, was afraid. But it took just a few days and we was bound down to a golden calf. So the prophet Hosea telling a woman of adultery to just sit by herself and belong to nobody else, that's not going to work. And that's how Hosea, as we get to the later chapters throughout these weeks, is going to be able to speak with the same conviction and same compassion that Yehovah God is speaking concerning the children of Israel. Continue.
For the children of Israel shall sit solitary many days without a king, and without princes, and without a sacrifice, and without a pillar, and without an ephod or teraphim. Afterward shall the children of Israel return and seek Yehovah their God, and Dawid their king. And it shall come trembling unto Yehovah and to his goodness in the end of days.
So this time that we're living in now is the days where we don't have a king or a prince. The sacrifices have been taken away because we're not at the house of God and the priests are not functioning. And when it's talking about the pillar and we know what the ephod is, because that's what the priests wore. When it's talking about the pillar and the teraphim, because usually when you see the word teraphim throughout the scripture, it's 90% of the times talking about an idol.
Right.
But a teraphim just means some sort of image or a statue. So it's talking about, we'll read that, or we read that before, about the Ark of the Covenant. These type of signs that were among the children of Israel, the Ark of the Covenant, the menorah, all of these things will also be considered teraphim. When you read in the time of King Saul concerning his daughter Michal and David, when David was hiding from King Saul, and they said that she put a teraphim or teraph in the bed, put a wig on it, dressed it up, so that when the guards just peeked in, they thought that David was in the bed.
That's funny.
A teraph is just a statue. Just because usually when we read it in the Holy Scriptures, 90% of the times it's referring to an idol, doesn't mean that that's what the word only means. So sometimes people get confused when God is saying he's taking these things away from us and includes the pillar and the teraphim. The teraphim is also just some sort of an image that represents something. So it could be referencing, once again, the menorah, the Ark of the Covenant, all of these symbols that we had around us in the land of Yisrael that will remind us to focus our attention on Yehovah God. So Yehovah God is saying, taking all these things away from us. Because once again, we are living in that time where there are no kings and there are no princes, there are no priests performing their functions. We don't know where the Ark of the Covenant is. The priests are not lighting the menorah in the evening like they're supposed to. The table of showbread is not there. All of these things are not around us. But these are the things that we're going to get back to. So when God took these things away from us, just like we read in the prior chapter, he took away the Sabbath from us, and he took away the appointed time from us. But we have to return back to these things. We can't return to the offerings now because we're not in the land that Yehovah God has commanded us to perform those offerings. But the Sabbath could be kept around the world. The appointed times could be kept around the world. So the things that Yehovah God took away from us in our anger, we have to return back to them and show him that we want to return back to these things. We want to return back to being one people. We have to show Yehovah God that we don't want to be a divided nation anymore, but that we want to return back to being the children of the living God. Amen. So these are the things that we look forward to, and we pray that the Most High God would allow those things to happen within this generation. So we're going to end, it'll be picked up in Hosea 4 in the weeks to come. But we want to thank Yehovah God for all that he has blessed us with, and praying that he continue to give us the success and the prosperity that we need as a people, and that we would turn our attention to him and to no one else.